When water ruled the stars, the emergency alarm echoed through Earth's Defense Command Center as Captain Elena Rodriguez hurried down the corridor. Her boots clicked against the metal floor with each urgent step. At 38 years old, Elena had commanded 3 successful missions against hostile alien forces, but nothing had prepared her for what waited in the briefing room. The massive holographic display showed a sight that made her stomach drop. 12 star systems marked in red across the galaxy map, each one representing a world that had fallen to the Aquarid Empire in just the past month. The blue-skinned conquerors had swept through civilized space like a tsunami, leaving nothing but surrender or destruction in their wake. General Patricia Hayes stood at the center of the room, her weathered face showing the strain of leading Earth's defense forces for over 20 years. Around the table sat the best military minds humanity had to offer, but their expressions revealed the same grim reality they all faced. The Kepler colony fell yesterday, General Hayes announced as Elena took her seat. That's the closest they've ever come to our solar system. Long-range sensors detect their main fleet moving toward us. We have maybe 3 weeks before they arrive. Elena studied the tactical display showing the approaching Aquarid vessels. Each ship looked like a giant teardrop made of blue metal, with massive tanks visible along their hulls. She had seen footage of these ships in action, and the memory still haunted her dreams. "What about the defense grid around Mars?" asked Admiral Robert Kim, a veteran commander who had fought in the Centauri Wars. "Our plasma cannons worked against the Zephyrian raiders." General Hayes shook her head. "We tried plasma weapons against the Aquarids at Proxima Station. The results were devastating. Watch this." The hologram changed to show a recording from the failed defense of Proxima Station 3 months ago. Elena watched as Earth's most powerful plasma cannons fired at an approaching Aquarid ship. The superheated energy beams struck the vessel's hull, but something impossible happened. The ship's surface seemed to absorb the heat, and moments later streams of pressurized water shot out from the ship with incredible force. "They convert thermal energy into kinetic force," explained Dr. Lisa Park, the chief science officer. "Their ships are covered in a substance that channels heat into their water reserves. The more we shoot at them, the more powerful their hydro weapons become." Elena had heard reports about Aquarid hydro weapons, but seeing them in action was terrifying. The streams of water moved faster than bullets, hitting targets with the force of a meteor impact. Worse still, the Aquarids could control water at the molecular level, making it harder than diamond or sharp enough to slice through any known material. 17 worlds have tried to fight them, continued General Hayes. 17 worlds have either surrendered or been completely destroyed. The Aquarids give every planet the same choice: submit to their rule and pay heavy tribute or face total annihilation. Commander Maria Santos, head of Earth's Intelligence Division, stood up and activated another section of the holographic display. "Our spies have gathered information about Aquarid society. They evolved on a water world called Tidal Prime, where their ancestors learned to manipulate water molecules for survival. Over thousands of years, they developed technology that makes water into the perfect weapon." Elena studied the images of Aquarid soldiers in their natural environment. They moved through water as easily as humans walked on land, their blue skin and webbed hands perfectly adapted for aquatic life. Their large, dark eyes could see clearly underwater, and their bodies could withstand enormous pressure. "They're not just using water as a weapon," Dr. Park continued. "They're using it for everything. Their ships run on water-based engines. Their armor is made from compressed water molecules, and their food comes from aquatic plants they grow in massive space-based farms." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Elena looked around the table at faces that showed a mixture of fear and determination. These were people who had dedicated their lives to protecting Earth, but they were facing an enemy, unlike anything they had ever encountered. "So what are our options?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. General Hayes sighed deeply. "The President is meeting with the Global Council tomorrow. They're discussing terms of surrender." "Surrender?" Elena's voice rose with anger. "We're just going to give up? Let these aquatic invaders take over our world?" "What choice do we have?" asked Admiral Kim. "Every military strategy we've tried has failed. Our strongest weapons only. Make them more powerful. How do you fight an enemy that turns your attacks into their advantage? Elena stood up, her hands clenched into fists. There has to be something we haven't thought of. Some weakness they have that we can exploit. A quiet voice spoke from the corner of the room. Actually, there might be. Everyone turned to look at Dr. James Chen, a thin man in his 50s who served as Earth's leading expert on thermal dynamics. He had been sitting silently through most of the briefing, taking notes on a small tablet. His black hair was streaked with gray, and his clothes looked like he had slept in them. Dr. Chen, General Hayes said with curiosity. You have an idea? Dr. Chen stood up slowly, adjusting his glasses. I've been studying the reports from all 17 worlds that fought the Aquarids. Everyone made the same mistake. What mistake? Elena asked. They tried to fight water with conventional weapons, Dr. Chen replied. But water has a weakness that no one has thought to exploit. He walked to the holographic display and began manipulating the controls. The image changed to show a scientific diagram of water molecules. Water exists in 3 states: liquid, solid, and gas. The Aquarids have mastered liquid water manipulation, but they've built their entire technology around keeping water in its liquid state. Elena leaned forward, intrigued. What happens if we don't let it stay liquid? Exactly. Dr. Chen's eyes lit up with excitement. Water becomes steam when heated rapidly, and steam expands with incredible force. If we could create enough heat to instantly vaporize their water weapons, the expansion would create a shockwave that could damage their own ships. Admiral Kim frowned. But you just said their ships absorb thermal energy. How do we create heat without making them stronger? Dr. Chen smiled for the first time since Elena had known him. We don't shoot heat at them. We create so much heat around our own ship that any water coming near us instantly turns to steam. Instead of trying to attack them, we make ourselves impossible to attack. General Hayes stared at the scientist. You're talking about creating a heat field around our ship hot enough to vaporize water instantly. That would require temperatures of several thousand degrees. How would our crew survive that? Advanced thermal shielding, Dr. Chen replied without hesitation. We build a ship with a superheated outer hull but a completely protected interior. Any Aquarid water weapon that touches our hull turns to steam immediately, creating an explosive force that pushes back toward their ships. Elena felt a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. It's like turning their own weapons against them. Precisely, Dr. Chen nodded. But it would require building a completely new type of ship, one designed around heat generation instead of heat dissipation. Commander Santos looked skeptical. How long would such a ship take to build? With our current resources and working around the clock? Maybe 6 months, Dr. Chen admitted. We don't have 6 months, General Hayes said grimly. We have 3 weeks at most. The room fell silent again as the impossibility of the situation sank in. Elena stared at the holographic display, watching the red markers that represented the approaching Aquarid fleet. Somewhere out there, an enemy was coming that had never been defeated, armed with weapons that turned humanity's strength against itself. But Dr. Chen's idea sparked something in her mind. Humans had always been adaptable. When faced with impossible odds, they found ways to survive. When confronted with superior enemies, they innovated. When told something couldn't be done, they proved everyone wrong. What if we stripped down the design? Elena said suddenly. What if we built the simplest possible version of your heat ship? No fancy weapons, no complex systems, just a hull that gets hot enough to vaporize water and engines that can move. Chen considered this. It would be incredibly dangerous. We'd essentially be flying inside a furnace. But could it work? Elena pressed. Theoretically, yes. But we'd need every engineer, scientist, and construction worker on the planet working together. And even then, the chances of success would be less than 50%. Elena looked around, the room at the faces of Earth's defenders. She saw fear in their eyes, but also something else. The same stubborn determination that had driven humans to explore the stars, to build impossible cities, and to never give up in the face of adversity. General, Elena said, turning to Hayes, I volunteer to command this mission. General Hayes studied Elena's face for a long moment. You understand that this would likely be a one-way trip? We're talking about an experimental ship built in 3 weeks using untested technology against an enemy that has never been defeated. I understand, Elena replied firmly. But I also understand that humans don't surrender. We fight. We adapt. We find a way to win even when everyone says it's impossible. General Hayes nodded slowly. Dr. Chen, how quickly can you have detailed plans ready? Give me 12 hours. Dr. Chen replied. You have them. I'll contact the president and tell her we have one more option to try before we consider surrender. General Hayes looked around the room. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to attempt the impossible. We're going to build a ship that fights fire with fire, and we're going to show these Aquarids what happens when they threaten humanity. As the meeting broke up and everyone hurried to their assignments, Elena stayed behind to study the tactical display. The red markers representing the Aquarid fleet seemed to pulse with menace, but for the first time in weeks she wasn't afraid. Humans had survived ice ages, world wars, and the challenges of space exploration through one simple trait. They refused to give up. Now they would face their greatest test yet, armed with nothing but ingenuity, determination, and the crazy idea of a thermal physicist who thought they could turn water into steam. 3 weeks to build the impossible, 3 weeks to save humanity, 3 weeks to prove that when humans were pushed to the edge, they didn't fall over. They jumped. Fire against the flood. The construction hangar buzzed with activity as thousands of workers swarmed over the skeleton of humanity's last hope. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on an observation platform, watching welders, engineers, and technicians work around the clock on the ship they had named the Tidebreaker. 2.5 weeks had passed since Dr. James Chen presented his revolutionary heat-based defense theory. What had seemed impossible was slowly taking shape before Elena's eyes. The ship looked nothing like the sleek vessels that typically represented Earth's fleet. Instead, it was bulky and angular, with a hull made from layers of specialized heat-resistant materials. Core temperature test in 10 minutes, announced engineer Sarah Martinez over the communication system. Sarah was a brilliant woman in her early 30s who had volunteered to oversee the ship's most dangerous component, the plasma fusion reactor that would generate the heat field. Elena climbed down from the observation platform and walked toward the ship. Even from 30 feet away, she could feel warmth radiating from the hull where workers were installing the outer thermal layer. The ship's exterior was designed to reach temperatures of over 8,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to instantly vaporize any water that came in contact with it. Captain Rodriguez? A voice called from behind her. Elena turned to see Commander Alex Thompson jogging toward her. Alex was the tactical weapons officer she had specifically requested for this mission. He was younger than Elena, only 29, but he had an innovative mind that thought differently about combat situations. What's the status report, Alex? Elena asked. The good news is that all primary systems are online, Alex replied, checking his tablet. Life support, navigation, and communications are working perfectly. The bad news is that we still don't know if the heat field will actually work in combat. Elena nodded. They had run computer simulations and small-scale tests, but there was no way to know for certain whether their theory would hold up against real Aquarid hydro weapons. What about the crew? 12 volunteers, all experienced in high-risk missions, Alex reported. Dr. Chen insisted on coming along to monitor the thermal systems. Sarah refuses to let anyone else handle the reactor controls. The rest are pilots, engineers, and communications specialists. As they talked, Dr. Chen approached from the direction of the ship's main entrance. His hair was more disheveled than usual, and his clothes were stained with grease and coolant fluid. Despite his appearance, his eyes showed excitement. Elena, Alex, you need to see this, Dr. Chen said breathlessly. We just completed the first full-power test of the heat field. They followed him into the ship through an airlock that felt like stepping into a refrigerator. The interior was kept at a comfortable temperature by an advanced cooling system. but Elena could hear the hum of enormous fans and pumps working constantly to maintain the thermal barrier between the superheated hull and the crew compartments. The ship's bridge was compact but functional, with stations for navigation, communications, weapons and engineering. Large screens displayed external temperature readings, and Elena was amazed to see numbers climbing toward 7,000 degrees on the outer hull sensors. "Watch this," Dr. Chen said, leading them to a viewing port with special filters. Outside, workers were using robotic arms to spray water onto a test section of the hull. The moment the water touched the superheated surface, it instantly turned to steam with a loud hissing sound and a burst of white vapor. "The expansion rate is exactly what we predicted," Dr. Chen explained excitedly. "When water hits our hull, it doesn't just evaporate, it explosively converts to steam, creating a pressure wave that pushes outward with tremendous force." Elena watched in fascination as more water was sprayed onto the hull. Each time the same thing happened. Instant vaporization followed by an explosive steam burst. "So when the Aquarids fire their hydro weapons at us, their own attacks will create explosions between us and them," Alex finished, understanding the implications. "It's like they'll be shooting themselves." Sarah's voice crackled over the ship's communication system. "All hands, prepare for final systems check. We launch in 4 hours." Elena felt a mixture of excitement and terror. 4 hours until they would face the Aquarid fleet in humanity's most desperate gambit. She looked around the bridge at the faces of her crew, seeing the same emotions reflected in their expressions. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of construction, testing, and preparation. News of the approaching Aquarid fleet had spread across Earth, causing panic in some cities and determined resolve in others. Millions of people had volunteered to help with the ship's construction, working in shifts around the clock. Children had sent drawings and letters of encouragement. Scientists from around the world had contributed ideas and expertise. "Captain," the communications officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth Defense Command." General Hayes appeared on the main screen, her face showing the strain of the past weeks. "Elena, our long-range sensors show the Aquarid fleet has reached Jupiter's orbit. They'll be at Earth in less than 12 hours. "Understood, General. We'll launch on schedule." "Elena," General Hayes said softly, "I want you to know that everyone on Earth is proud of what you're attempting. Win or lose, you're showing the galaxy that humans don't go quietly into the night." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in thoughtful silence. Elena looked out through the filtered viewing port at the Earth below. Somewhere down there, 8 billion people were counting on a crew of 12 and an experimental ship built in 3 weeks. "All stations, final launch preparations," Elena announced. "Sarah, bring the reactor to full power. Alex, all defensive. Systems online. Dr. Chen, monitor thermal readings and prepare for combat testing of the heat field." As the crew moved to their stations, Elena settled into the captain's chair. The ship's engines hummed to life with a deeper sound than she was used to. Instead of the high whine of conventional plasma drives, the Tidebreaker's engines produced a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the entire vessel. "Reactor at full power," Sarah reported. "Outer hull temperature reaching maximum threshold. All thermal barriers holding steady." "Navigation online," called the pilot. "Course plotted for Jupiter intercept." "Communications ready," announced the communications officer. "All Earth defense frequencies monitored." Elena took a deep breath. "Launch sequence initiated. Take us out of orbit." The Tidebreaker lifted, away from Earth's surface, its superheated hull glowing like a small star against the darkness of space. As they accelerated toward their destination, Elena couldn't help but think about the irony of their situation. Humans, who had evolved on a planet that was mostly water, were about to fight an enemy that controlled water itself. 8 hours later, Jupiter loomed large on their screens, its great red spot swirling like a cosmic eye. Long-range sensors detected the Aquarid fleet in orbit around the gas giant, 15 ships of various sizes, all with the characteristic teardrop shape that housed their massive water reserves. "Contact in 20 minutes, Alex reported. "The Aquarids are moving to intercept us." Elena studied the tactical display. The enemy ships were arranging themselves in a formation designed to surround and overwhelm a single target. It was a formation that had worked against every other opponent they had faced. "Dr. Chen, how are our thermal readings?" Elena asked. "Hull temperature stable at 8,000 degrees, Dr. Chen replied. "All cooling systems functioning normally. Interior temperature holding at comfortable levels." As they drew closer to the Aquarid fleet, Elena could see the enemy ships more clearly. They were beautiful in their own way, with smooth blue hulls that seemed to flow like liquid. Transparent sections along their sides revealed the massive water tanks that powered their weapons and engines. "Incoming transmission," announced the communications officer. "The Aquarids are trying to contact us." "Put it through," Elena ordered. A melodic but alien voice filled the bridge, speaking in heavily accented English. "Earth vessel, this is Fleet Commander Koros of the Aquarid Expansion Force. You will surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Resistance is futile." Elena looked around at her crew, seeing determination in their faces. "This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Earth Defense Ship Tidebreaker. We decline your offer. If you want our world, you'll have to fight for it." There was a pause before the Aquarid commander responded. "Your species' stubbornness will be your destruction. We have conquered 17 worlds. Their weapons could not pierce our defenses. What makes you think yours will be different?" Elena smiled grimly. "We're humans. Being different is what we do best." She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. "All hands, battle stations. Alex, do not fire any weapons unless I give direct orders. Sarah, be ready to push the reactor beyond normal limits if necessary. Dr. Chen, this is it. Time to see if your theory works in practice." The Aquarid ships began moving toward them, their hulls beginning to glow as they charged their hydro weapons. Elena could see streams of water beginning to form at the front of each vessel, compressed into jets that could slice through any known material. "First enemy ship firing," Alex announced. On the main screen, Elena watched as a massive stream of pressurized water shot toward the Tidebreaker at incredible speed. This was the moment of truth. Either Dr. Chen's theory would work, or they would be cut in half in the next few seconds. The water stream struck their superheated hull with tremendous force, but instead of cutting through the ship, something amazing happened. The water instantly vaporized upon contact, creating a massive explosion of steam that expanded outward with incredible force. The pressure wave from the steam explosion struck the Aquarid ship that had fired the shot, causing it to rock backward. "It worked!" Dr. Chen shouted with excitement. The steam explosion pushed them back. More Aquarid ships opened fire, sending multiple streams of high-pressure water toward the Tidebreaker. Each time the same thing happened. The moment their water weapons touched the superheated hull, they turned to steam and exploded, creating pressure waves that pushed back against the attackers. Elena watched in amazement as the Aquarid formation began to falter. Their own weapons were creating a defensive barrier around the Tidebreaker that they couldn't penetrate. "Captain," Alex said with growing excitement, "we can turn this into an offensive weapon. If we get close enough to their ships, the steam explosions from their own attacks will damage their hulls." Elena nodded, understanding the tactical implications. "Pilot, take us directly toward the center of their formation. Maximum speed." The Tidebreaker accelerated toward the heart of the Aquarid fleet, its hull glowing like a miniature sun. The enemy ships continued firing, but their attacks only made the human ship more dangerous. Each water stream that hit the hull created a steam explosion that damaged nearby Aquarid vessels. "Enemy ships are pulling back," the sensor operator reported. "They're trying to maintain distance." But it was too late. The Aquarids had built their entire military strategy around the idea that their water weapons were unstoppable. They had never encountered an enemy that could turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. One by one, the Aquarid ships began to retreat. Their commanders realized that every attack they made only gave the human ship more power. For the first time in their history, they were facing an enemy they couldn't defeat. Fleet Commander Koros's voice came through the communication system again, but this time it sounded different, less confident. "Earthship, request immediate ceasefire. We wish to negotiate." Elena looked around at her crew, seeing smiles and tears of relief on their faces. They had done the impossible. They had found a way to defeat the galaxy's most feared weapons using nothing but human ingenuity and determination. "Commander Koros," Elena replied, "we're listening." The battle for humanity was over, but more importantly, it had shown the galaxy something new. Humans didn't just fight with weapons or technology. They fought with ideas. They fought with innovation. They fought with the absolute refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. The tidebreaker continued to glow against the darkness of space, a testament to what humans could accomplish when they refused to surrender. And across the galaxy, other species began to take notice of the small blue world, whose inhabitants had just done something no one thought possible. They had turned water into fire, and in doing so they had changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever.